Good morning and welcome to Confabulation. Today is Friday and want to thank our listeners and our viewers. Again, this is Confabulation from Our Sister's House, a face-to-face talk and podcast show. And today my co-hosts are David and Janae, and we'll be talking about the relationship between gun violence and domestic violence. So before I start this off, let me just put out a plug for domestic violence. I'm just going to be casual and myself, okay? So here we go. If you or anyone that you know is experiencing domestic violence, please contact our sister's house at 253 383 4275 or visit our website at oursistershouse.com. Okay, so today, as we talk about gun violence, I'm going to ask you at the end of our broadcast, hit us up, let us know what you think, how we're doing, and what you'd like to talk about. Okay, here we go. So let me read a story to you about, let me give you a survivor's story about gun violence. Okay, so this story, I did research, and this story is Giovanna's story. When Giovanna first met the man who would one day hold a gun to her head, he seemed perfect. He was charming, friendly, and respected in the community. Slowly, he isolated her from her loved ones and began controlling her every move. She was living with constant abuse. He started using a gun to intimidate her. He would threaten to shoot her or himself, sometimes in front of their two children. Giovanna requested a protective order, and the judge granted it, but allowed her abuser to keep his weapons, leaving her and her children vulnerable. So, when I read that, I'm going to ask you, David, because you are our legal advocate and you work with orders. How do you see much of this?
Yeah, I do see lots of weapons violence and stuff like that, especially when it comes to guns. Oftentimes, it makes it whatever situation they're in increasingly more violent, just because of the presence of a weapon. Oftentimes, we've talked about last session about power and control, and that is another form of power and control that they can use. They have a weapon. Um, I can attest to one of my clients. They said that when they had a conversation, or the conversation or argument started spilling over, getting I guess out of the abuser's control, they would often take the gun and flash the or they start loading their gun like they're going to do something. So there's different forms of weapon violence, and especially when it comes to guns, it often increases the chances of something deadly happening. And when it comes to that, even the police know that it oftentimes becomes increasingly violent, and that's oftentimes why orders for protection on the protection orders, that when somebody asks for a weapon surrender, it's really hard. It's not really hard to get, but oftentimes it is, because the police usually don't even enforce it, even though this is a red flag state for weapons. Like you're supposed to surrender weapons if they ask for it on the protection order and they grant it by the courts, but oftentimes it's not really enforced. So it only empowers the abuser in the situation. So and again, like I said, even the police know that it's a violent situation, and a lot of times they don't enforce it for one reason or another.
Well, when I think about that and you say for one reason or another, once a protection order is granted, one would think that there would be no other reason or there should nothing should weigh in except that order is there, and the gun should then there should be the no gun contact, or whatever the there is the law and the order for no guns. So that seems so crazy to um, grant an order but allow them to keep the gun, the weapon.
Well, sometimes people are, these people that do have the guns, the abusers in the situation, they're manipulative in one way or another. Oftentimes, they will lie and say that they don't have the guns, that she's lying. Or they'll say, yeah, I do have guns, but I gave it over to somebody else.
Mhm.
And it's really hard for police to enforce that because, they don't know where the guns are at. And, they can, extract the guns, they could take the guns away from them. But unless it's like they're in, some type of criminal case, they're usually not gonna, take away the weapons. And usually these people that have weapons know other people with weapons. So even if they, are supposed to surrender the weapons, or they might give over a few weapons or the ones that are at the house, but they might have some other ones. So these people that have guns, they'll find another way to get a gun. And oftentimes, some even clients, some don't even want to even bring up the weapon surrender because they know that it might be these people love their guns. So they want to have them, and so they know that sometimes it might make whatever situation worse if they do are ordered to have a weapon surrender. So a lot of different ways where it can become easily deadly or more violent just because guns are in the situation. And taking guns away is not always a solution. So you definitely have to leave it up to the clients and stuff like that, but it's also up to the courts to enforce it, and also the police.
Right. So, Janae, in your position, do you see this?
So another thing that I want to point out, being a new resident of Washington, I see that it is very easy for one to get a gun license or, license to conceal a weapon. And I think that that's another problem, or could be another problem in the community. And I think another thing about it is that most of the men that live here in Washington are in the military. And we hear a lot from our clients that their abusers are part of a branch. And in those branches, they have access to all of these weapons. And I think that that makes it a little bit harder to get, I guess, surrender those weapons. And in the military, they would still, have access to those kind of things. And I think that in a way to, have that power and control over a victim is to, bring a gun into play and threaten them. Since the victim would know that they have a gun, they would try to, tread as lightly as possible because they know that that person is probably not afraid to take it there. And another thing that I learned is that during quarantine, in the state of Washington, the rate of domestic violence, like that ended in homicide, rose. And that's something that was pretty scary for me to read, as a woman and, working with clients and things like that. So it's just, that another form of power and control that abusers use to have that leverage on a victim.
So when we look at the gun and violence, when we look at guns, look at domestic violence, and narrow and come right here into the state of Washington, the percent is very high. The statistics say that they're well in the United States. Period, says that people with um, disabilities are particularly susceptible to IPV due to a variety of factors, and one of the factors is because of the disability. The violent crime is there, and women with disabilities are significantly more likely to experience IPV and with guns, and this is to include psychological aggression. Um, I'm looking at I guess I want to say what would we say or suggest regarding policy recommendations? Because common sense, well, you look at it and it says common sense laws that keep guns out of the hands of abusive partners reduce gun violence and IPV, but the existing loopholes in the federal and state law leave guns in the hands of abusive partners and stalkers, and often it's with deadly results. And again, it goes back to what David was saying, the surrender weapon. Can they, I guess I'm in my mind, I'm asking, hmm, they can lie and keep the gun, but I'm just wondering how we could make law enforcement or the government more accountable for not really locking down on that, on the surrender, the gun surrender um, policies.
I think that once something like a protection order is in place or anything, or if the abuser has a past and has any type of felonies that they shouldn't, this is the law now that they shouldn't have any access to guns or be around guns. But like David said, it's that access. Like, these laws can be set into place, but abusers still, if they wanted to go get one, they would know where to find one and still be able to carry that around and be an endangerment to themselves and, the community.
Exactly.
Um, I'm sure I can't think of a policy. I'll first say that I can't think of a policy that would make it better. I'm sure there is one or several or whatever it would be. And you might have to look at different states to look at that, to find out, if there's any other states that have found a good solution or something like that, or maybe another country that found a good solution. But it's just we have the laws for it. We have the weapon surrender on the protection order. It is a red flag state. I think that's what it's called. So
Mhm.
saying that, if somebody has a protection order, they have the right to ask for a surrender of weapons, and then those weapons need to be confiscated. It's just the implication of the law. Like, how is that done? Just because the laws are in place, how do they enforce it? And it needs to be enforced. But what would be a efficient way to do so, and make it safer for the client? That is, the way getting around it, which is the hard part. So
Right. There's so many loopholes because even a person going to purchase a gun from a certified gun shop, they're supposed to do the background check before they sell the gun, but are they doing that? So,
And in that moment, if they're going to, like, try and buy it from somewhere, I think that it becomes, more about the sale and that person getting the money. So they're not really interested in looking, into a person's background when honestly that could be like the most crucial point. And I have a question. So like if that like sparks a question in my mind, if the protocol is to do a background check on people that you're selling guns to and you don't, and then after they get that gun from you, like 2 days later, they commit a like a crucial crime. How does that go back to the person that sold it to them? Like, could they be in trouble as well for not really doing their job to the extent that they're supposed to? Because certain things can be avoided if certain things are done correctly, I feel like.
right. I do believe that if guns are so, well, when there was the crime where the guy bought all those guns and went state to state killing people. I think that there was a law um, put in place. And I do believe that if they don't follow proper protocol, they can lose their license and not sell. But there's so many places that they can buy guns illegally without going through the process, the background process, without the background check without notifying them that they have an order. So there's loopholes for the people out there. Like you said, if they want a gun, they're going to get a gun.
I agree.
Yeah, so I just think the only thing that isn't helpful is I don't think making the gun law harder to get a gun is necessarily helpful, especially the people that, there's plenty of people that do have guns that aren't, abusing their partners or anything like that, or, are using it in the correct way. So, making it harder, there's people that are always going to get guns no matter what. I'm not saying, obviously you should make it harder for the people that have protection orders against them or weapon surrender. Yes, definitely make it harder for them. But, if somebody doesn't have a past or history or something like that, I mean, I don't think it should be, it's helpful for, people that are law abiding citizens to make it harder for them to get orders or weapons. There are people that do want to do it the correct way, and they do that. So.
Right. So, well, I mean, there's only so much that we can actually do as citizens. Law enforcement, government has to step in and implement and push and nail down. And law enforcement just needs to be, they need to be there on their job. When you think about the correlation, how many, I was looking at statistics too. So all of this amazes me, but how many women are killed by guns? And it's ridiculous. But it's another, I feel like it's just something else. That's a piece of domestic violence that needs to be looked at, taken seriously, and some things need to happen. And it's going to take more than talking about it. But that was our conversation for today: domestic violence and the relationship with gun violence. Thank you for listening. Thank you for joining us. And again, if you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, contact our sister's house at 253-383-4275 or hit us up on our website, oursistershouse.com. You guys have a great weekend, and we'll see you next Friday.